Alrighty, it's now 7 o'clock. The chair will now call this zoning board of appeals meeting for April 2, 2026 to order. The first item is pledge of allegiance. If you want to stand, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Kevin.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This item is roll call. Brian, would you help us with that?
Yes. Knight.
Present.
Bott.
Present.
Wood. Present. Wendy is not present and excused. And Wayland.
Very good.
Here.
Do we have minutes from the previous meeting?
We do.
Do we have copies for everyone?
They might be in your packets in the
let's see.
folder I gave you. You should. If you want to use mine, you don't have to get it.
Okay, just to take a quick peek.
Yeah, take a peek. They look like our last meeting.
Okay, I think just 3 of us were at the last meeting, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. So if you guys will take a quick look and see if there's any problems with the minutes?
Actually, it's 4 of us. Yep.
Was there 4 of us?
Yep, with Knight.
Oh, Wendy was here, but I mean that's here tonight. Going to-
No, there's 4 at last month.
Say it again?
There was 4 at last month.
Oh,
Motion to approve minutes.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved, as presented. Okay, I don't have any initial comments at this point.
We don't have any secrets.
Can you what?
So
Yeah.
mics don't work in front of you?
They're for recording.
Oh.
I'll make sure we talk about it.
Yeah, for sure, we will. Let's move in now to the hearing request of Steve Dennis for interpretation of the ordinance. First is the issue that is being presented to the board. Let me, if I can, summarize that for you. We are being asked to interpret the text of our zoning ordinance. Specifically, we are being asked the following, and I quote, "In the context of the Caucalan Township zoning ordinance, is an incinerator the same as a crematorium?" And additionally, a response recently filed by the attorney for the applicant requires us to be able to properly address the request to interpret the term "including," quote unquote, contained in the consolidated uses chart, page 31 of the ordinance, under the heading, quote, "Cemeteries, including columbarium, mausoleums, and crematoriums." The applicant argues that under this language, and in particular the use of the term "including," means cemeteries are intended to be in, crematoriums are intended to be in cemeteries, and the reference in the ordinance addresses cemeteries. Under the ordinance, the term incinerator is specifically defined. However, the term crematorium is not, and thus the request for this board to interpret. We need to take into account the board's authority to act under section 9042 of the Caucalan Township zoning ordinance. We are granted, this board is granted, exclusive authority to interpret the text of the zoning ordinance, which we will attempt to do tonight based on what we hear from you all. Okay, so moving forward, we will at this time take input from the applicant or the applicant's representative. We could.
Thank you. Pat Parker. Should I be at this microphone? Is that the best place, or stay
You're
here?
fine. That's the recording device.
Okay.
Stand
Yeah,
right
you
there.
can sit if you want. No one has to stand if you're uncomfortable or if you want.
No, I'm comfortable standing.
Okay, very good.
Pat Parker from Simon, Figueroa and Parker, 5206 Gateway Center, Flint, Michigan. We're the attorneys for the applicant. And the chair has put an outline of the issues tonight and why we're here. The use that the applicant is asking for is a standalone crematorium, and that's important because it's not something which is attached to a cemetery. It's not something that's related to a cemetery. It's not something which is part of a funeral home. It's a single-purpose entity in a single-purpose building, only used for the cremation process. And it's the use which is different than a crematorium which might be included as part of a cemetery. And when you look at the zoning and the use and how it's listed right now, the zoning classification that mentions the word crematorium is in connection with as part of a cemetery. And so obviously that's in not an industrial area, it's in a agricultural residential type area, which makes sense for a cemetery. We're going to have graves dug where bodies are going to be interred, where you're going to have funerals, where you're going to have necessary parking and a big enough facility to have people come in to celebrate the life of someone who's passed away. Totally different operation, totally different use than a standalone crematorium. And one of the things that brings us here and that brings you here is that uses and operations sometimes evolve differently than a zoning ordinance. I've been around long enough that I remember back when tanning salons became a thing. No zoning ordinance had tanning salons mentioned in the building ordinance because they didn't exist when they wrote the zoning ordinance, or they weren't used, or they weren't regularly there. So interpretations have been made by boards to decide whether a tanning salon was similar to and should be in the same zoning classification with the same restrictions as a barber shop, as a dentist's office, as a physical therapy. There are a lot of other possible analogous type uses, and where did it really fit? And I think that's really what we're asking you to do tonight in interpreting the zoning ordinance. And a standalone crematorium doesn't necessarily fit in the same classification that a cemetery does. And the industrial zoning that the applicant has is pretty appropriate for the actual use of and the operation of a cremation spot where bodies are cremated. And not where funerals are held, not where people come to visit, not where people come to visit a grave after someone has been buried, but for that single use of incinerating the body. We have, there are a number of these facilities which have grown up around the state of Michigan. I don't know that they were very common very long ago, but as funerals have gotten more expensive and cremation has gotten to be more used for families, both because of cost and for other reasons, that this is a function which is kind of a newer function. And I know there are crematories that are used by a variety of different funeral homes, and they'll bring all of the bodies for cremation to one particular kind of industrial use, and they'll do the actual cremation there at that spot. And that's the use that the applicant is proposing, and he has an industrial lot for that. Now, again, this isn't much to do with what you guys are doing tonight, but he did come to the township and was told that he was in the right place, and now it's turned out that they believe that he was in the wrong place. But we're starting to try to get a decision that this is the right way to view this, and this is the right way to, as a common sense, view the ordinance, so that a use, and the crematorium, once he gets licensed, and he has state licensing to go through for this, is an allowable use. It's a legal use, and it's a use that should be allowed by the township. And the classification in the industrial property makes way more sense than it does in the classification it has for cemeteries. I know that I'm looking at the township's legal memorandum that was brought here by their attorneys who are here today. And they mention on page 4, the ZBA could conclude that the applicant's proposed definition is generally consistent with the commonly understood meaning of a crematorium or crematory, which the Cambridge district described as the building where dead people's bodies are disposed of. And we think that a proper interpretation of the ordinance as it stands now will say that that is highly analogous and more sense to an incinerator than a cemetery. Steve, you want to speak?
Yes, I do. Good evening.
And we'll be happy to answer any questions.
We will after you
Yes.
make your presentation, then we'll see if the board has any questions.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Steve Dennis, 170 South Huron. When I began this process to establish a crematorium, I was working with the previous zoning administrator, Mr. Dennis Finn. He confirmed that indeed the use was appropriate for the zone prior to a notice being sent out to the public. A township trustee that was aware of the special use permit asked Siri in front of Dennis Finn in regard to incinerators and their use in crematoriums. This was confirmed through a simple search, and that indeed incinerators are utilized specifically in that setting. A public hearing from the clerk at the time, Kayla Schlanderer, was scheduled and then sent out. The notice stated, for the purpose of installing an incinerator to be used as a crematorium. I was also in contact with Don Hamilton, who is the township planner, and currently working on the master plan with the planning commission. When asked for perspective, he indicated that incinerators are an encompassing term and the course was appropriate. After my interactions with each of the township's officials in their respective fields, notice was sent out and hearings were scheduled. And according to U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA.gov, defines crematory incinerator as means to any incinerator designed and used solely for burning of human remains and animal remains. The MCL section 456.522, Cemetery Regulation Act 251 of 1968 defines cremation as the incineration of the body of a deceased person. Retort or cremator that are used in cremation are identified in any search engine as a cremation incinerator. Retorts are classified as a type 4 incinerator. Cremator and incinerator can be used interchangeably regarding the process. You do not have cremation without incineration. You do not have a crematorium without an incinerator. The nomenclature is designed to maintain dignity throughout the cremation process, so one doesn't associate humans with general waste. But according to the IIA, Incinerator Institute of America, human and animal remains are considered a type 4 waste. That includes pathological waste. Type 4 waste is strictly designed for crematory style incinerators. Any search of incineration will clearly state cremation, associated to or defined as, in free time.
Anything further on that? Yeah, you all set?
I'm all set.
See this.
Go ahead.
Does any of the board members have any questions for at this time? I guess I have one. Can I ask why you didn't seek, once this turned into what it did, you didn't seek a variance from this committee to be able to operate that in that zone?
We thought at the time, there are a number of directions we could have gone. We thought at the time that an interpretation of the ordinance made the most sense. If it turns out that you don't interpret the ordinance the way we go, a variance is certainly a possibility we would have to consider.
Any other questions from any board members? Okay. We'll now hear the input from the township attorney, if we may.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Trent Cunningham from the Township Attorney's Office. Our office provided a report, a public report for the board, which you should have in front of you today, that sort of memorializes our position. Basically, our position is that the crematorium use is listed. It's listed in what district it's allowed in. The incinerator use is listed and defined in what district it can be allowed in. And there's well-settled case law in Michigan that if a use is listed in one district and not listed in the other, then it's prohibited. So that's our general position as a sort of baseline. The report that we provided you is meant to be a tool for this board to use as you consider tonight. Ultimately, the decision will be made by the ZBA, so we also supplied you with a proposed decision, which you can use and we would encourage you to use, but ultimately the decision will be made by this board, and so if you deviate from that decision or have any additions, we could potentially add to it here on the Word version of it to supplement it to include the findings that this board makes, and so that is all provided for you as a general tool. Overall, I think that one thing to note is that the zoning ordinance does have rules of construction that this board must use to interpret the zoning ordinance, as well as the fact that courts employ rules for statutory interpretation or for interpreting ordinances that are applied, well settled, and ultimately what a court would be looking at if this was challenged and brought before a court. And so we would encourage this board to use those standards as well, which are laid out in our public report. To address some of the claims by the applicant's attorney, I understand their position. I do think that the cemetery issue is a bit of a collateral issue. It wasn't included in the initial application. It was raised in their supplemental materials, and I think this board certainly could take that issue on tonight if it chose to, but I don't think you're compelled to take that issue on. And I think the reason I say it's collateral is that it's a different use in a different zoning district, and so this district here in the industrial district lists incinerators as a use allowed by special use permit. It does not list cemeteries, it does not list crematoriums. And so whether or not that use is all encompassing, whether or not a cemetery has to also include a crematorium is somewhat immaterial for this case because none of those uses are currently allowed in the underlying zoning district. So that's why I sort of mentioned that that's somewhat of a collateral issue. I appreciate the analogy to the tanning salons, but I do think this is fundamentally different than a new use that has shown up that is not addressed. As this board is well aware, this use is squarely addressed within the ordinance. There's a term for it, it's in there, it's included. It's not something that has just come up that we have to try and fit into what use it would be appropriate for. It's expressly listed in there as well. And then the claims that this should be classified as an industrial use, I want to reiterate to the board that when you interpret the zoning ordinance, you can't go against the actual text of the zoning ordinance. That is set in stone, set by the township board. And so the crematorium use not being listed as an industrial use is not really something that we can fit in there. You could interpret it to be an incinerator as the applicant is requesting, but it's not necessarily, we can't completely contradict the ordinance and say that a crematorium full stop should be allowed in the industrial district because that would require an amendment. So either we have to interpret the incinerator use as allowing this crematorium use, which would effectively render an incinerator and a crematorium as exactly the same use. One of those canons of interpretation that I mentioned that courts will apply when interpreting language is that you should not interpret something that would render something meaningless. So if you combine these two as one use, an incinerator and a crematorium are fundamentally indistinguishable, you would render those different provisions, those different terms, as completely meaningless. And so when giving effect to an ordinance and when interpreting an ordinance, you should interpret it in a way that gives every word its meaning. We have to assume that the drafters intended that. They knew their intent when they drafted the zoning ordinance was that the crematorium use was a distinct thing from an incinerator. That's why an incinerator is defined to include waste substances and things that we would not typically include in a crematorium, or when we associate thinking of burning our loved ones or of human remains, we typically would not call it a waste substance. And so we're here to answer any questions throughout the evening. As I said, we provided a proposed decision as well as a report. We would ask that you reference those and use those as a tool, but ultimately the decision is the Zoning Board of Appeals decision. And so we're happy to help in whatever way we can. Anything you have to add, Matt? Does that cover it? Well, happy to take any questions you guys
Very good.
have.
Thank you for your input. Do any of the board members have any questions of the township attorney?
Oh, sorry. Not at this time.
No? Okay. We're very silent apparently. We listen, we don't speak. At this point, we'll take some input, if there is any, from the zoning administrator, Tom. There you are.
I don't have a lot to add to this because much of what transpired took place before I began work with the township. And I think given what I've learned about how we arrived at where we're at, I think mistakes were probably made on both sides. That being said, the only thing that I think is perhaps germane to your decision that I have to contribute is if this wasn't a special use, and if it was my decision based on the language of the ordinance, and solely that, which oftentimes that's my job. In this case it isn't because it requires a special use permit process. But if it was solely my decision, the ordinance says that a crematorium is not listed as a use in the industrial district. You can certainly make an argument that it should be there, but it isn't. And so based on the language of the ordinance as it stands today, I would be unable to grant a permit for that particular use at this time.
Thank you. Okay, this is a point in time for public input. Is there anybody in the public that would like to comment? Yes.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I know I can't address him, but I guess I can address the board. I had a conversation with him, and he's proposing to suggest that crematorium be put in light industrial. conversation I had with the man, I thought he might bring that up.
Well, keep in mind that our function here tonight is to interpret the existing ordinance. We can't change things. We can't move one to the other. That's not our function. We're simply here to explain as best we can what we believe the language means. Okay.
Gotcha.
Is there any other? Yes, sir, please.
All right. I got a question, plus I got something about the crematory. It's more than just burning a body. There are bones left. What do they do with the bones? They grind them. So this is more than just burning a body. And this is something we don't need around here. Then I was at the last meeting, and his building got red tagged because he built it without a permit. Why is it still standing, number one, and was he fined over it?
Well, keep in mind, the function of this committee is very limited to simply responding to requests, and the request here is to interpret the ordinance. We don't have any control over anything beyond that, so please understand that.
Well, then again, then what he did was illegal when he built the building, and what says he's not going to follow the laws doing this again? You're talking about industrial. Industrial is when you employ 25, 30 people. What's he going to do, employ 3? That's not the same as an industrial. I think if you're going to go ahead and if he wants it, it should be put on the ballot in November and let the people of Cullen Township vote on it.
Thank you for your input, sir. Yes, sir, please.
First off, my name is Joe March, who's 2922 South Huron Road. You didn't give your address, but
1638, straight across.
You know what this community doesn't want anything. This community doesn't need this. This community fights everything. You guys fight everything. My business has been here for 82 years and I'm 13, family owned. And I've never seen a level that doesn't make any sense. You want to push everybody out of here.
Sir,
you can start paying the taxes.
Can you address the full board, please?
I pay my taxes.
Sir.
How many people do you employ?
Hell of a lot more than you probably do.
Gentlemen,
That's
gentlemen,
great.
I'll have to excuse you if you can't.
Point of order, guys, please.
Okay, anybody else that would like to comment on? Yes, sir, please.
It's plain and simple. What the ordinance says is what the ordinance is. It's not the ordinance, you can't have a crematorium there, you can't have a crematorium there. The ordinance was set up to protect the people of the community, for a reason. You can't force it down everybody else's throat, and everything was set up to protect the people. It protects you. You don't feel that way. Some other people might not feel that way, but that ordinance protects people. It's a simple no. It's cut and dry. Not zoned for it. You can't go around the block to make it zoned for it, and you can't keep ignoring ordinances. Put it in front of the people.
Very good, sir. Thank you for your input. Anybody else would like to comment?
I'd like to say something just about our ordinance. I'm Dennis Finn, the previous zoning administrator, and our zoning ordinance allows people that live in the agricultural, rural, residential zone to have 4 domestic animals per acre, which includes a cat, a dog, and maybe a chicken. Chickens aren't even allowed in residential areas, but everybody's got them because people need eggs for food. You're going to take food out of somebody's mouth for having a chicken? So that's why we have interpretations. A lot of these things don't make sense to begin with.
And some of those ordinances was put into place when the chickens were already there. People that homesteaded the property and have been there for 100 years, and you're not going to go in and tell them, well, you were given the property to go forth and to live and eat, and then turn around and put an ordinance there and cut those people out.
I understand, sir. We're not here to debate one another. I just want to hear input if there is.
I'm just saying there's a lot of things in the zoning ordinance that need to be looked at again and possibly amended or changed.
I concur.
Thank you for your input. Anybody else like to comment? Yes, sir.
I wasn't aware that the township attorney was going to make a presentation, but he stole a lot of documents comments and things I had to say, but I do believe that he's spot on in what he says. It's not within this scope to merge, to selectively pick two different sections. You can see on clearly page 32 and 31, there's two distinct districts that this is allowed in. To blur the definition of incinerator and crematorium wouldn't be right. It's not right for this board. The individuals that wrote that zoning back in 2010, for what we don't know why, but for whatever reason, they did distinguish two separate definitions for crematorium and incinerator. And I don't think it's within this board's right to blur those. This should go back. I talked to Mr. Dennis after the last meeting. This shouldn't be in, should it be in AR? No, I don't think so. I think a request should be made. This goes back to the planning commission to really look at this, where this should be allowed within the township. That's it.
Very good, thank you, sir.
Sorry, Patrick
Yes.
Lucas, 1766 Marilla Drive.
Go ahead, please.
Good evening, my name is Ellen Dennis, 11171 Londonderry, Washington Township, Michigan. I was a federal government contract specialist for 46 years at the U.S. Army Tank Automotive Command. I negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts in support of the military's operation. As you can imagine, I've had my fair share of dealing with discrepancies among lawyers and contractors. I've become aware of this situation in the township and wanted to share my perspective given on my background. Documents written by individuals that cannot speak to the intent, allowing others to interpret, usually lead to some discrepancy. I asked, what is the discrepancy and what's the impact on the community? My understanding is that a light industrial zoning has a greater impact on the area, and uses permitted there tend to reflect that. Agricultural residential does not share the same impact. Having a crematorium anywhere in this township that is in the AR zoning appears to be missing some clearer values. A simple search can shed light as to how to resolve using a specialized industrial furnace called a cremator or retort, which utilizes intense heat, typically between 1400 and 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, to reduce human or animal remains to bone fragments. Is a cremator or retort an incinerator? A simple Google search says yes. A cremator is a specialized type incinerator, often classified as a type 4 incinerator. They are specifically engineered for the respectful, controlled reduction of human or animal remains rather than general waste. If the ordinance has incinerators zoned in light industrial, why doesn't it include the entities that operate them? This appears to need correction. If you put this township's ordinance into an AI platform like ChatGPT, you will find that this discrepancy is obvious in all platforms. I hope that the board can see these errors as plainly as I do and take the appropriate action to correct it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Yes, sir, please.
Dennis Benasha, 617 14th Street, Bay City, Michigan. I'm a sitting planning commissioner at the city of Bay City, and I'm also a civil engineer and have been doing site design for almost 40 years. Mr. Dennis approached our firm for this project, and I dug into it to see where we were going to be and what we had to get done. And then Mr. Dennis decided to go with the cheaper firm. I don't hold that against him, but with my knowledge and my experience, having looked through the ordinance, I make a different analogy. You wouldn't call a two-car repair garage an auto dealership because you don't have the parking lot with new and used cars that would make it an auto dealership. In this case, being that it's a crematory, there's no mausoleum, there's no headstones, there's nothing that would make it a cemetery. And I can understand where you guys are at legally, that you're not probably going to be able to solve this issue tonight, but I want you to know that, from my experience, the crematory should be separate from cemeteries And I think your ordinance needs to be reviewed to that effect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else, please? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Ann Dietrich, 9083 White Oak Circle, Grand Blanc, Michigan. I have some family here, and I saw a news story and it piqued my interest, and I've been following the story. I wanted to share a few thoughts. If crematoriums are listed in agriculture and residential, it appears that establishing an entity in this zone contradicts the main operational component is versus their identity. To cremate is to incinerate, and incinerators belong in industrial setting regardless of what is being processed. I looked up my own township's ordinance in Grand Blanc, and a crematoria is listed in light and heavy industrial areas. If incinerators are permitted in industrial areas and incinerators are primarily components in a crematorium, it appears that the issue is in the ordinance itself. I view this situation as one that is easy to define, like she said, in a simple search engine. There are a lot of agriculture residential zoned areas, and I don't think anybody would want a crematorium in one, would they? Would you want one next to your neighborhood? No, of course not. And unfortunately, people die. And when people die, we have a decision to make. You bury them or you burn them. It has to be done somewhere. It is a service that needs to be done by someone, somewhere. These facilities have to go in somewhere, right? From what I can see, I drove by the area that you were concerned about, and I don't understand where the concern is there. I think that you should offer a variance and allow him to do his business there. I don't see any reason why. I think that you do need to clearly define your ordinance and straighten that out, though. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else, please? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Elizabeth from 170 South Huron. I'm sorry, also 703 Sydney Street. I just want to point out that I did a little bit of research, and you've got Charter Township of Genesee, City of Flint, Lenox Township, Grand Rapids, White Lake Township, Lodi Township, Isabella County, City of Cadillac, City of Lowell, and Ionia all allow it in their light industrial. It's in their ordinances, and if you look at the maps behind you and you see where all the AR is, that's like everybody's neighborhood. So in everybody's backyard, where it just makes sense in the light industrial. And especially a lot of townships and cities follow the same thing.
Thank you very much. Anybody?
Greg.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Hi, Greg Detrimo, 463 Cottage Grove Road. The only thing I have to say is when the original ordinance was made, the crematoriums probably weren't thought of much because it wasn't that popular at that time, so that's why they put it in the cemetery area. Now that it's getting more popular, you may have to look at it and say, okay, maybe it should be in a different area. But that's basically all I had to say.
Very good. Did we cover everybody? Hopefully? No? Yes? Happy to hear from you if you have anything to add. Okay, it appears that we have taken all of it. Okay, at this point, I'd like to turn it back to the individual board members who may or may not have any questions or discussion on the issue to present at this time. Why don't we start with Steve Buck? Do you have anything to add, Steve?
No, I have nothing yet.
Okay. Matthew Woods, anything you'd like to say?
Well, I'd just like to give crematorium is the place where incineration of cremation, if you will, but it is called a retort, or in the case of for human remains. But I kind of feel on the definition of industrial. I mean, I understand that there's a lot of, everybody has their own ordinances, and there's no doubt our ordinances need a lot of tweaking and changing. And they were put in place long before any of us here, came into this, talk on and being involved in the governmental actions. But I know with what is in place, as far as the ordinances we have now, I think somebody brought this up, that crematorium is under the umbrella of cemetery. And I think the word include, it doesn't mean that it has to be included in a cemetery or next to a cemetery. It's included under that same umbrella. And that I think that just because it's there and that's the ordinance the way it is, I understand a variance might be able to change that or whatever the case. But and again, you know, the ordinances are the way they are, but the definition of crematory, when you Google it or look it up, it is, crematory is separate from an incinerator. And an incinerator needs to burn trash. Not that it doesn't do the same type of, you know, the end outcome is ash, but ash and bone, and then the bone has to be crushed. So there's a big process there. It's not just a matter of putting somebody in that crematory or in that furnace and burning them. There's a whole process. And there are people who do want to go to that crematory, you know, family members and so forth, and go through the process. And by all rights, that's kind of their last resting place as a complete human body. So they turn to ash. There are instances where they are held, the bodies are held for an amount of time before, for whatever reason, prior to. So, I mean, it is, either it's with a funeral home or it's going to be at the site itself where they're held, or in turn the ashes are held thereafter. But, and not that this really has anything to do with AR versus light industrial, but I kind of feel like light industrial, and that's the way it seems to be going with this, but light industrial is, to me, it's like, okay, we're industrializing the process of cremation of the human body, and I think that there's a sanctity and there's respect for the human body, not, you know, and through the process of it. And I'm not saying that Mr. Dennis isn't done. I'm not saying where his location is and everything like that. I mean, there's a crematory, you know, at one time right in downtown Bay City. So really, neighbors, whether they had a problem with it or not, I've never had any issue, but I just feel that the way things are defined right now and the way the ordinance reads right now, that that's the way it is unless things are changed.
Mr. Williams, you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I agree with our citizens and the people that said ordinances are outdated. But a lot of times, in my books, last time it was updated was 2010. We went 16 years without this discussion. Sometimes it takes a situation like this to change stuff and make it better for everybody and make it more understanding. We're here for a process, and I know our stuff is outdated, and we are working on it, on updating it and making it better all the way through. But it's not like this is happening every day. It's not like it happened last year. I know it's happening right now. But the way our books are right now, it is zoned for AR. Moving forward in the next years to come, and you guys all know everything in the governmental process takes time. It's a slow grind, especially if you want to do it right. Every time you rush, every time something is expedited, there's something that's missed. And then there's another one of these, or a planning commission meeting. So, I think you're right. I think you're right. We do have a lot of ordinances that are backdated, but a lot of them don't ever get addressed until there is a situation like this at hand. So, I'd like to move forward with it being right, and we are trying to do what's right for our township people. That's what I got.
Very good, thank you. My turn. Please keep in mind that the function of this board is not to determine where a crematorium should or should not be, industrial, agricultural. That's not our function. Our function here tonight is very simple, to interpret the language of the existing ordinance. In that regard, I have some comments. An analysis of this question requires us to first look at section 102 entitled Rules of Construction for some guidance in resolving this. Specifically, two rules contained therein are relevant to this discussion. 102(a) provides, quote, "the particular shall control the general," close quote. 102(9) provides, quote, "terms not defined in Article 2 shall have the meaning customarily assigned to them." To find customarily assigned meanings of a particular term, one need only consult an ordinary dictionary. An incinerator is defined as a furnace designed to burn waste materials, primarily used for sanitation and waste reduction. The term waste material is key. That term means unwanted, unusable, or discarded materials. A crematorium is defined as a specialized building or facility designed exclusively for the incineration of human remains. Our ordinance defines the term incinerator as, and I quote, "a device used to burn waste substances." The term waste substances means unwanted, unusable, or discarded materials having no immediate value. Answering the secondary question that came in, the term including can be defined as part of something or adding something to a category. Under our ordinance, an incinerator is permitted with a special land use permit only in District 1-1. A crematorium, on the other hand, is permitted with a special use permit only in District A-R. And remember, we're not here to pick the district. We're here to interpret. It's noteworthy, to me at least, that the ordinance includes the term crematorium with other similar structures, such as a columbarium, which is a facility to store cremated human remains, and a mausoleum, a facility to store whole human remains. I interpret including to mean adding to the category. All identified facilities can and are located outside of cemeteries, in many cases. Some aren't, but many are. The term incinerator requires a definition because it can refer to different types of units and or structures, some needing to be regulated and some not. Whereas the term crematorium is a well-defined structure, very heavily regulated by state law in all respects. An incinerator, as defined in the ordinance, is to be used to burn waste substances. Human remains are not waste substances, but instead are considered sacred remains with significant value. Yes, a crematorium uses a heating vessel to reduce a human body to ashes that may or may not replicate the function of an incinerator. This does not, in and of itself, render a crematorium an incinerator, as that term is defined in the ordinance, and the crematorium is ordinarily defined. The ordinance clearly distinguishes between the two terms. They are not the same. If the drafters of the ordinance considered them the same, they would have limited the language to a single term. The ordinance references two distinct structures with distinct purposes and uses. Having said that, I have a proposed motion that I'd like to bring forward at this time. Inasmuch as it is lengthy and detailed, I'm going to provide each board member with a copy so they can follow as I read it off. So you'll see what I'm talking about. If anybody else wants a copy, I'm more than happy to. I have a few left. Sure.
Yeah, me too.
Would you like a copy, sir?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You guys, while we're handing stuff out, I'll have a copy of the proposed written decision as well.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
just making sure. Yep.
Yes, yes.
They want to address that in a minute.
Okay. So here's my motion, guys. And again, yeah, it's lengthy, so bear with me. I move the board, pursuant to the authority granted to the board by Michigan Statute 125.3603 per N1 and the Caucallan Township Ordinance Section 904 per N20, to answer the question presented and interpret the text of our ordinance as follows. Number one, the use of the word, quote, including, close quote, in that portion of the ordinance, page 31, that lists cemeteries, including columbarium, mausoleums, and crematories, permitted in District A-R, does not mean or require that crematories be placed in cemeteries only. All structures can be located separately, independent of a cemetery. The term including, quote unquote, is intended to expand the list of permissible uses rather than couple them together. Number two, the terms incinerator and crematories, or crematorium, as used in our ordinance, are not synonymous and refer to materially different facilities with materially different uses and purposes. Number three, the term, quote, waste substances contained in the ordinance define the ordinance definition of incinerator, Article 2, Paragraph 60, has the following meaning, quote, means unwanted, unusable, or discarded items, not including human or pet remains. Number four, the term crematories or crematorium, as used in the ordinance, means as follows: a specialized building or facility utilizing a heating vessel designed and used exclusively for the incineration of human and pet remains only. Number five, under the ordinance, an incinerator, as defined in Article 2, Paragraph 60 of the ordinance, and further supplemented in number 2 that I just read above, is permitted with a special use permission in zoning district 1-1 only. Number 6, under the ordinance, a crematorium as defined in number 3 above, which I previously defined for it, is permitted with a special use permission in zoning district A-R only. I submit that for the board for consideration, and I would look for a second and third one. Please take your time to read it if you need to.
I'll second the motion.
And then, Mr. Chair, if I could just propose somewhat of a friendly amendment here to possibly also...
No, sir. No, sir. It's not time to do that. Sorry.
All right.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a second.
Yeah.
Roll call vote. Brian, can you help us with that?
Well, is there any further discussion?
No. We're moving forward on the motion. You've had your opportunity to speak.
No, not for us. It's board members. So you have a motion and a second, and then is there any further discussion from the board on the motion?
If they have it, they'll ask for it. Okay. Thank you for your help. Can we have a roll call vote on it?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Whalen?
John Knight.
Yes.
Brian Whalen. Yes. Steve Bott.
Yes.
Matt Woods.
Yes.
Sorry, was that a yes?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Motion carries. I have now signed certified that the vote and certified that it's been accepted. So at this point, you're all excused. We thank you for your input. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.